So whenever you hear people talking about you cannot prove racism because someone fires you from a job, they are absolutely right.
Can a black person be racist? Or is that a misunderstanding of what racism actually means? In today's episode of Race, Religion, Racism, Dr. Price explains the important distinction between racism, prejudice, and bigotry, while referencing Dr. Anderson's argument that racism is more than personal dislike. It involves the power to establish and maintain a system that disadvantages another group. So, whether you agree or disagree, understanding the definition is essential before debating the issue.
And the author of the celebrated book, Black Labor, White Wealth, in a public meeting held here in the Crenshaw Christian Center Faith Dome, said almost the identical thing that Mr. Keinville said. That was the one that we quoted last time, in reference to racism. Dr. Anderson, speaking to a mostly black audience, said, and I quote, I want you to understand that you are in a very highly competitive situation. You're going to be competing to survive and prosper. And that's what racism is all about. Contrary to what anybody tells you, and I just saw a definition of racism in the Washington Post just last week, who is a noted columnist, who is a conservative. And what he was really talking about was prejudice and discrimination. He wasn't talking about racism, but he was mystifying the word. That's why I finally figured out why he's always on the wrong side of issues relating to black folk. He thinks a black person can be a racist. A black person cannot be a racist. Now, I said this before, I want to say it again. That's not to say that a black person cannot be racially prejudiced, that a black person cannot be a bigot, but a black person cannot be a racist because racism is about economics. It's not about color. Racial prejudice is about color, and anybody can be prejudiced, but only a certain group can be racist. All right, a black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means that one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resources that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never, say never. Dr. Anderson goes on to say, never in the history of the earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources where they have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century. Racism, we're not talking about racial prejudice now. You got to keep those two things separated. Okay? When they began to commercialize slavery against blacks, that's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing you need to know about racism is racism comes from the word race, R-A-C-E. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about you cannot prove racism because someone fires you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism. Because racism, hear this well, racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. Because I discriminate against you, that's individual. That's personal. It's not group-based. And so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, which is very important, is that the word race means being in competition. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we're in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete and survive, or not compete and perish. The system is stacked against you. And if we don't pull together, we're going to be in the dugout, not out on the playing field. We're going to be on the bench, not on the court shooting baskets. And that's how you subjugate a people, is keep them divided. And they have done a masterful job. Now listen, again, black people must learn how to compete and survive. Now, see, we're not talking about being against anybody. That's where everybody gets scared when you start talking about it. It's amazing. Every other culture group can come together and everybody thinks it's nice. But when black people try to get together, all of a sudden there's something wrong with that. See, that's a part of the mentality and the mindset to keep us divided so that we're fragmented and don't have strength. See, if you take a string, wrap it around your hand, just a little small string, and take the other string, the other end of it, and wrap it around your hand and hold it like this and go, you can break that string. But you put 500 of them strings together, you will never break them. All right? Now, in my humble opinion, and that's the end of the quote. Let me read that again. Black people must learn how to compete and survive or not compete and perish. End of quote. In my humble opinion, these statements by Mr. Keivel and Dr. Anderson say all there is to say about the definition of racism as practiced here in the United States. In other words, these two men have given us the technical definition of racism. However, in this segment of our teaching, my purpose is to talk about racial prejudice, which traditionally has been interpreted as racism. That's what the average person thinks when he hears the word racism. He thinks racial prejudice. In a book entitled All God's Children, author Stephen L. McKenzie, associate professor of Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Rhodes College, Memphis, Tennessee, copyright 1997 by Stephen L. McKenzie. On page 122 makes this illuminating statement, and I quote, "Despite the progress of the civil rights movement in the 1960s and the following decades, racism is still very much an issue in this country. Racial integration, which has crept into schools, businesses, and other institutions in America, tragically has made little headway in the churches." Fannie Lou Hamer's observation about Sunday morning church service being the most segregated hour in America is as true today as it was 20 years ago. End of quote. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, from 1619, now I don't know, I have to read this, but do you have have you ever been on a commercial airliner and right in the little pocket in front of you, they have little plastic bags in case you get air sick? Do y'all have any plastic bags with you today? Because what I'm getting ready to share with you now may tend to cause air sickness to come upon you. But I hope you'll be able to maintain yourself. From the same book mentioned earlier, author Paul Keivel on page 121 says, and I quote, from 1619 until slavery ended officially in 1865, 10 to 15 million Africans were brought here to America, and another 30 to 35 million died in transport. A journey called the Middle Passage. In all, 40, conservatively speaking, 40 to 50 million Africans were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents, end of quote. Now, we just quoted a white man, not an angry black revolutionary. We just quoted from the book of a white man, Caucasian, Caucasoid, white, 40 to 50 million were abducted or killed by our white American and European foreparents. End of quote. That's awesome, to say the least. We get upset and righteously indignant, and rightly so, when we think about Adolf Hitler and the annihilation of 6 million Jews during World War II. Which was without question a tragedy. But who gets righteously indignant and upset about 50 million black Africans who were abducted or killed by the forefathers of this nation? If you ever go to Israel on a regular commercial tour of Israel, the first place that they take you to is the Holocaust Museum. And it is a sick feeling that you get in your innards when you walk through that museum and see the photographs of what one group of men did to another group of men for no other reason than they were who they were, as though they had anything to do about who they were. Where be the Holocaust Museum over 50 million black Africans? Well, I forgot, they don't count, they're just animals anyway, so forget them. Oh yeah, that's the attitude. Forget them. People want to get upset. I start talking about this and people get upset. You don't get upset with the Jews for having the Holocaust Museum. And I agree with him. I think they ought to have it. Thank God they have it. And hopefully enough people with enough brains will go there and see that mess and never be tempted to do that or let that happen again to any group of people. But what about the black Africans? Don't go there. Don't go there. I am. Don't go there. I ain't gonna say no more about that. What does he mean? Not for you. Don't worry about it.
So here are 5 reasons why Dr. Price and Dr. Anderson make that distinction. This perspective is based on a specific definition of racism as prejudice combined with institutional or systemic power. So not everyone uses this definition, but Here are the main reasons they argue a black person in America can't be racist in that sense. Number one, racism is more than personal hatred. It also involves the ability to create, enforce, or benefit from systems that disadvantage another racial group over generations. Point number two, American slavery created a lasting system, followed by segregation and discriminatory laws created institutions that affected housing, education, employment, voting, and wealth. His point is that these systems were established by those in positions of power and had long-term consequences. Point number three, prejudice and bigotry are different from racism. A person of any race can be prejudiced or bigoted toward another person because of race. However, under Dr. Price's definition, prejudice alone does not become racism unless it's connected to institutional power and systemic enforcement. Point number four, historical context matters. Dr. Price emphasizes that words and definitions can't be separated from history. Understanding how laws, policies, and social structures operated helps explain why he distinguishes racism from individual prejudice. And number five, accurate definitions lead to better conversations. So whether viewers ultimately agree or disagree, Dr. Price's conclusion is that the terms being defined clearly helps avoid people talking past one another. Many disagreements arise because people are using different definitions of the word racism. So in closing, yes, we will continue to use the word racism, but I just wanted to point out the very distinction of the meaning from prejudice, bigotry, and racism, because we do use the term as a blanket statement, but there is a clearly defined definition. And the goal of this series isn't to divide people, but to encourage honest discussion grounded in history, evidence, and scripture. And Dr. Price challenged listeners to think critically about the words we use and the systems that have shaped society. Whether your perspective is to seek truth with humility, examine the facts carefully, and remember that our identity and ultimate hope are found in Jesus Christ. So, with that in mind, continue to renew your mind.
Two of the most powerful politicians in America decided that a racist smear was politically useful. The Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration to terminate the temporary protected status, also known as TPS, for hundreds of thousands of Haitians. Not because Haiti is safe, not because the facts have changed, but because this administration wants more people for ICE to deport. Springfield was terrorized, schools were closed, bomb threats poured in, white supremacists descended on the city. They never apologized. Instead, they spent 2 years putting that lie to work and turning it into government policy. And now that campaign of fear is the official policy of our government. Haiti remains consumed by political collapse and humanitarian disaster. The conditions that justified the TPS still exist. And these are people who care for our seniors, build our community, and pay billions in taxes. They followed the rules, they trusted the American promise, and now they're being told that a racist political narrative matters more than the law they followed to a T. This is not who we are, America. The House has already passed a bill extending TPS because the facts demand it and because decency requires it. Now the Senate must pass it before the mass deportation tears lives and communities apart, all because of a racist, reckless, bigoted, blatant, dishonest, and disgusting campaign lie.